Not so long ago, the iPhone was championed with relatively small 4-inch screens and significant top and bottom bezels, exemplified by the classic iPhone SE. The idea was that the iPhone fitted every pocket and was compact and powerful. But the arrival of the Plus models in 2015 opened the iPhone up to a wider world, traditionally dominated by Android phablets, and pretty successfully. The larger the display, the wider the range of uses for the phone, and I'm not at all surprised to see a 2018 supersized version of 2017's iconic iPhone X. It's also somewhat outrageously priced, up to £1,149 in the UK for the 512GB version, though if you're happy with 64GB and stream most of your media, then the base iPhone XS Max here, XS Max if you will, is around 1100 or equivalent in your local currency. Yes, it's still very expensive, but Apple rightly refers to the XS range as no compromise, so the best materials, the best components at every stage, really. And with the best support in the phone world by a huge margin, you can just about justify the investment as long as you have a valid use for the extra pixels. Existing iPhone quote Plus users don't gain quite as much, though. Anyone with an older iPhone 6s Plus, like my daughter, or 7 Plus even, will also appreciate the extra speed, much better camera array, terrific speakers and wireless charging. Apple are dead right with the no compromise tag too. The XS Max is sumptuously made and finished. A polished and curved steel frame sandwiched between two glass panels and with meticulous attention to detail. The eagle-eyed will notice an extra antenna band compared to previous iPhones, essentially meaning more reliable signal for cellular and Wi-Fi. The display is gorgeous, a Samsung-made AMOLED panel and 6.5-inch diagonal at 1242 by 2688 pixels resolution, working out to a 19.5:9 ratio. Minus the notch, of course. Opinions have differed on this across the industry, but as I said last year when the iPhone X appears, it's just a matter of thinking, well, I've got extra display either side of the camera, it's not a bit is missing. It's all a question of mindset. As usual, there's the default True Tone colour balancing for the displays, and this works really well. Purists hate that the display is being messed around with, but I love this. I left True Tone on and full auto. Inside there's Apple's 2018 chipset, the A12 Bionic, with a mixture of low and high power cores, all fabricated at 7 nanometers. Nanometers, that's the atomic scale. Why should you care about chip die size? Because smaller die sizes mean lower power requirements and thus longer battery life. Although Apple doesn't advertise the RAM in each iPhone, usually to avoid confusing users, the iPhone XS Max has 4GB, which seems on the low side for a 2018 flagship, except that iOS does have better memory management than Android, and you shouldn't compare like for like. Storage is obviously whatever you pay for. 64GB here is a sensible first step on the ladder, and many people will be absolutely fine with this for casual use. It all depends how much video you capture, I suspect. There's no 128GB option, sadly, so there's a big step up to 4 times the storage, i.e. 256GB and then 512 beyond this. It's a slightly cynical jump for Apple to enforce, getting people to go for the middle model, hopefully, and suitably increase price. Oh well. There's now an embedded SIM card, an eSIM, but it doesn't work here yet, at least not in the UK. Don't worry, there's a normal SIM slot too, but it gives extra options for the future. Face ID is faultless as it was last year. Screen off, press the button, I'm unlocked. It's at least a year more advanced than competing face unlock solutions on Android, being secure enough to authenticate for payments and passwords rather than just, getting into your phone. Effectively, you pick up your iPhone XS Max, the display powers on automatically, raised to wake, then the phone sees your face a split second later and it's unlocked. Done. You'll see time, date and notifications, though unlike on Android phones, annoyingly, you've still got to swipe upwards before you get to see the phone's main UI and applications. In fact, as I see it, the XS Max, the only possible compromise here is the use of iOS itself. I know I'm going to get letters, but moving to a static home screen, top of screen, back controls, no card expansion or mass storage MTP mode, limited background operation and so on, the usual reasons for eschewing iOS in favour of something more flexible, like Android, are just as valid as ever. But to anyone who's used iOS over the years, it's business as usual, with just a larger display, more pixels and more content. Also benefiting from the increased display size is the iOS keyboard, of course. Just as on past Plus models, the extra width means that each individual key is larger and the final result is very comfortable, whereas on the smaller XS, typing is all a bit fiddly and over-reliant on auto corrections. Or maybe I'm just used to bigger phones now in late 2018. Not everything is bigger and better, of course. The extra screen height in the XS Max means it's virtually impossible to swipe down for notifications or control center using the same hand that's holding the phone, so the XS Max definitely becomes a two-handed experience. Heck, it probably was for you anyway. I'd also take issue with the swipe up to start from the unlock screen. You do swipe up and you get the notifications, but you can't get to the main UI. Apple has programmed this to only work when started from the very bottom of the display, i.e. you can't just swipe up with your thumb from anywhere. And this is harder to do on the giant display on the XS Max than it was on the smaller iPhone X. Again, the experience becomes one needing two hands. With the launch of the iPhone X, many apps and games were adversely affected by the bottom of screen home bar and the presence of the notch. Quite understandable. One of my test games is Real Racing 3, one of my favourites. This effectively ran in a black barred box at first on the iPhone X, but this and all other titles have now been adapted over the last year. They now run full screen, working their UI and displays around the notch. On the imaging side, the camera hardware is slightly bigger than on the iPhone X in 2017. The core specs are nigh on identical, though the bump on the back is slightly larger, hinting at a slightly larger sensor with larger 1.4 micron pixels. We again have a nicely balanced wide angle and telephoto 12 megapixel optically stabilised lens pair with software managing when to switch, as appropriate, and making the combination easy to use without too much thought. As usually happens with Apple, the inclusion of a good telephoto lens was one of the factors which raised the iPhone 8 Plus and then the X to the status of arguably the best overall camera phone in the world, since the well-regarded Pixel 2 range from Google produced stunning standard images but had no zoom facility. In fact, borrowing from Google's HDR Plus ideas, the iPhone XS Max here adds some Apple multi-exposure trickery, dubbed Smart HDR, going further than traditional HDR by blending in frames from a sequence of up to 10, shot with different parameters. And with the A12 Bionics machine learning allegedly working out what you're shooting and then using its deliberations to guide which frames to blend in. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, of course, and I was very impressed by the XS Max's output. In all light conditions, standard shots are stunning. See the examples throughout this section. It's hard to take a bad photo with this. I'd put this as the best camera phone in the world right now by a small margin over the Galaxy Note 9. In low light, the software does force out the use of the telephoto lens, as usual, but then zooming in low light is a bit niche. Maybe concerts, it's just something to be aware of. Shown off at the iPhone X's launch was a new editor of portrait photos called Depth Control, i.e. those taken in portrait mode to add artificial bokeh, i.e. shallow depth of field. The new edit control allows retrospective adjustment of the bokeh effect and is artificial but no less impressive. Video capture is still excellent and hasn't changed much since previous iPhone generations, though I cannot emphasize enough the support for stereo audio capture now that Apple has added by popular demand, at long last. As a result, there's wind noise when outdoors, but there's also more sense of space and depth in videos. A bigger display means one thing: you'll consume more media, more YouTube, more Netflix and so on. Watching streaming films on the iPhone XS Max is a treat. The notch is handled in different ways according to the application, though on a screen this size, even black bars on all sides, Netflix, isn't a showstopper. Google's YouTube is more flexible, offering both a barred view and, with a quick finger display, a full screen notched experience. And again, the sheer screen size means that the notch isn't really that noticeable. The iPhone X range introduced stereo speakers, or at least a tune earpiece and bottom firing speaker array, and the result was pretty convincing. It was hard to fault. Samsung has now done the same thing the last 12 months, ditto Huawei, with results improving all the time. The iPhone X was comparable, but the XS Max's speakers are in a different league, with the earpiece putting out significant mid-frequencies as well as top-end, and with the bottom speaker pushing out good bass. Here is a demo. Mr. Bonamassa, full volume, and with the screen splayed out. You can really hear the bass drum and a bit of bass guitar as well. Hopefully it's coming out. Pretty darn good. The best speakers I think I've heard on a standard smartphone for a long time. And of course, with the 6.5-inch AMOLED screen, the combination is the most cinematic yet on an iPhone. You should be used to the iPhone not having a headphone jack by now. You do get in-box Lightning earpods, but they're not brilliant. And if your expectations of a smartphone are high enough to go for the XS Max in the first place, then the chances are you want something a bit extra on the headphone front too. And for music, don't talk to me about AirPods, which offer much the same outer ear quality. So if you do have a lovely pair of over-ear or in-ear reference headphones, this is from Vio, this is from Marshall in my case, note that you also don't get a Lightning to 3.5mm adapter stroke DAC in the box anymore, which is a bit crazy given the price of the phones. Yes, Apple could argue that many users will already have such a dongle from a previous iPhone, but then wouldn't these have been passed down the chain to their new owners in the family or friends or eBay? It's a bizarre cost-cutting measure for Apple. It makes no sense in the real world. Ditto the continued inclusion of the slow 1A 5-watt charger in the box, when every other flagship phone in the Android world comes with a fast charger of some kind, typically 3 amps or 4 amps, or using higher voltages via quick charge. Why does Apple still ship the weediest mains charger in the world? One theory is that Apple thinks that slow charging will prolong the iPhone's battery, and it may well do, but it still comes across as a cheapskate gesture from a company that's already making more money than King Midas. The iPhone XS Max does charge from the USB Type-C power delivery chargers, as on the newer MacBooks, via an adapter, and at a full 3 amps, making Apple's decisions here even more mysterious. The iPhone XS Max's battery is obviously larger than that in the standard XS, at 3174 mAh, and lasts appropriately longer, getting through a very heavy day here with no issues. But just as battery life was always a reason to buy the Plus iPhones in the past, it's also the same for this XS Max. The new XS range are rated for dust and water at IP68, giving marginally better water protection than the previous IP67. But don't worry about the difference. Either way, you can drop your iPhone into the sink by accident and you'll be absolutely fine. Now, the iPhone XS Max price is a function of the materials and components used, including better camera, better speakers, durability improvements, extra waterproofing, the very latest chipset, the exemplary Apple Store network for support. It's all of these factors thrown together, plus in the UK, the weak pound against the US dollar. The functionality versus price curve has never been remotely linear, and Apple takes this to the extreme. I'd normally exercise caution at working your way up to the very top of the curve, but in this case, the XS Max offers a totally new display size for an iPhone. You know I love Android phablets, think a Galaxy S9 Plus shooting this, Google Pixel 2 XL, and the iPhone XS Max brings iOS into the exact same playing field for the first time. Yes, you'll find Apple's XS Max purchase price gut-wrenching to say the least, but after the shock of buying it, you'll settle into a pocket computer experience for many years that will make it all seem like a decent investment.